Order. I will call Tulip Sadiq to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. I remind other members that they may only make a speech with prior permission from the member in charge of the debate and the Minister. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Tulip Sadiq to move the motion.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under you, Mr. Stringer. I've now been a public servant for 15 years, initially as a local councillor and then as a local MP for nearly 11 years now. And a lot of people who will see my job will know the bits about voting, about legislation, about making decisions on national policy. But most people won't know about the casework that I deal with, which can often be life or death, whether it's helping women who are fleeing domestic violence, whether it's helping people who are fleeing persecution, or whether it's my constituent Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, who was imprisoned in Iran for a crime she didn't commit. But from all the casework that I've done, some of the most harrowing casework I've dealt with have got to do with children. Very early on in my career, I dealt with a young boy who was abducted from his mother and taken away by his estranged father overseas. I then dealt with a man who was grooming his stepdaughter, and I had to step in and help get him away. And finally, I dealt with parents whose children have been abused, either sexually, from neglect or cruelty in nurseries. It's very difficult to explain in words what those casework surgeries are like, because it's every parent's worst nightmare when you've put a child in a nursery at a time when they're unable to speak, walk or talk. You've entrusted a place to look after them, and then you find out that very place, aside from being a safe haven, has actually abused that trust, and they have been subject to violent acts or sexual cruelty. For 6 years, I was a shadow minister for early years and early education, and I'm an absolute champion for the sector, and that's what I want to emphasise, that every time I spoke to early years educators and practitioners, I knew that safeguarding was the focus of all the work that they did, and they wanted to make sure that children were protected. And many of the conversations that I had with early years protectioners were about strengthening the security of nurseries so that they could do their job properly, whether it was about two-person mandatory rule per child, whether it was ensuring that Ofsted examined digital devices, a proper system for whistleblowing if there was anything problematic happening in the nursery, and especially whether mandatory CCTV should be a safeguarding tool for nurseries across the countries. Yes.
Mr Chairman, first of all, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Hampstead and Highgate for all that she's done over the years. In the short time I've been here, I found the Honourable Lady to be assiduous, committed, dedicated to all of the issues. And I've always tried to support the Honourable Lady, and she knows that, and all of her campaigns. Here's another massive campaign which I commend her for. Does the Honourable Lady agree that when it comes to child safety, which is core and imperative, and every one of us, as either as a grandfather or as a father, worries about our children and our grandchildren? And CCTV, for one, could simply be the norm in affluent areas, but those who provide care in all areas should be able to access affordable systems that meet the need. And there's a cost, there is a financial factor to it, but it's really important that the core issue and the number one priority is safety.
Thank you. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention and for his support for all my campaigns throughout the years as well. He's hit on a point that I will definitely comment on, and I think it's fair to say you can't put a price on a child's safety. But before I talked about being a public servant for 15 years, well, in the world of politics I've been involved for 25 years, and I know that campaigns and legislation cannot be done on a whim. We've got to look at all sides of the argument, which is why before this debate I spoke to a lot of the nursery managers and early years practitioners in my own constituency to asked them what they thought about installing CCTV as a mandatory policy across nurseries. There were some things that were raised, and I think they're very legitimate concerns. And the reason I want to raise it is because we need to be aware of all the obstacles we're going to face if we really genuinely want to implement this policy. Some of the legitimate arguments that were put forward was about price and about diverting of resources. There was a question about, would we end up exploiting, or would someone end up exploiting what we're trying to do, which is safeguard the children in the first place? Would it get hacked? Would there be a use of AI and would someone use that in a manner that we didn't want to distribute illegal material? And I think these are legitimate concerns which I will come to address, because I think if we really want to make a change in the system, if we really want to change the landscape, we've got to tackle head-on the obstacles, out of which the honourable gentleman mentioned one. Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I thank her for all of the work that she's doing in this area, and particularly on behalf of her constituents who have been so badly traumatised by the experience they have recently been through. And I'm grateful to some of those parents for meeting privately with my committee, the Education Select Committee, recently to discuss the change that they wish to see. On Tuesday, my committee will hold an oral evidence session in public to explore safeguarding in early years settings in public. Would she agree with me that in addition to practical measures like compulsory CCTV that can strengthen safeguarding in nurseries, there is a need to explore how the inspection and accountability framework around the early years operates, so that every parent can be sure that when they entrust their precious child to an early years setting, they know that they can be safe?
I thank the honourable friend for her intervention, and I absolutely agree with her. And I think as elected officials in this place, we need to make sure that we're protecting our constituents and making sure that when they do trust a nursery or a childminder with their children, that they know that they're doing the right thing. I'm going to talk a bit about examples in which CCTV has helped secure convictions. I just want to warn everyone in this room that the details are quite distressing. The first case I want to talk about is a very sad case of Genevieve from Tiny Toes Nursery in Greater Manchester. Some people would have read about this case. While being placed down to sleep in the nursery, Genevieve was tightly swaddled inside a blanket. She was strapped face down onto a beanbag without being checked by the nursery staff. The nursery worker responsible was convicted of manslaughter due to the CC footage that was obtained from the nursery. The CCTV also disproved the nursery worker's claim that she had checked on Genevieve every few minutes, and it later led to the conviction of one of the perpetrator's colleagues for the deplorable neglect of 4 other babies. Tiny Toes Nursery, where Genevieve was killed, was rated good by Ofsted 5 years earlier, but the trial heard evidence suggesting it was run shockingly. On the day that Genevieve died, there were only 2 members of staff looking after 11 babies. The previous weekday, there were 16 babies, far in excess of the 1-to-3 ratio for under 2s in England. Ofsted watching CCTV would have picked this up. Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for raising that case as a Greater Manchester Member of Parliament. I know that the important issue of mandatory CCTV in nursery settings is a critical part of the campaign for Gigi that she talks about. But there is also the issue of allowing parents access to CCTV footage, and I've raised this case before in Westminster Hall, but my constituent Frances found it extremely difficult to access the CCTV footage of an incident in which her daughter was seriously mistreated at her nursery in my constituency. Does she agree that cases like this show that as well as having mandatory CCTV in nurseries, that parents need greater rights to hold providers to account and to be able to access the footage they need?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I'm very sorry to hear about this case. I fully agree with him that if we're going to have CCTV and we want to use it as a safeguarding tool, we've got to be able to access it in incidents like he describes. The other case I wanted to mention is Riverside Nursery in Twickenham, where the local MP has been doing a huge amount of work. Lecca was convicted of abusing 21 babies at a nursery in Twickenham after footage showed that the worker was pinching and scratching children, kicking one boy in the face. In that case, as with Genevieve's, which I've just mentioned, CCTV was essential to the prosecution. Metropolitan Police went through CCTV from the nursery that showed her pinching, scratching children all aged 18 months to 2 years, under their clothes, on their arms, legs and stomachs. The CPS put forward compelling evidence that clearly showed her targeting children when colleagues were either out of the room or had their backs turned. They also called on experts to prove that the injuries the victim sustained were consistent with pinch marks. Another horrific case happened in Bristol, where a nursery worker sexually abused 5 toddlers in his care. The prosecutor in the case told the jury that some of the evidence against the perpetrator came from CCTV from inside the nursery. She used the CCTV that showed that the nursery worker's predatory behaviour towards young children, and the way that he was initially caught was that the nursery manager witnessed him on CCTV putting his hands down the trousers of a child. She immediately sent him home, got in touch with HR, but he wouldn't have been sacked if the CCTV hadn't been there, and then ultimately convicted. The final example I want to use is from Australia. And some people in the room will be aware that last year in August, Australian federal, state and education leaders signed off on plans to begin a trial of CCTV for childcare centres. 300 childcare centres across the country will install purpose-built daycare CCTV systems. The trial is part of a larger $189 million government-funded initiative to enhance safety, security and reporting in the childcare sector. Funds will be released over 4 years to help small and medium-sized operators purchase and install CCTV cameras for childcare centres. The Australian childcare CCTV trial is taking place as part of a federal reform to enhance safety in the childcare sector, particularly in response to a high-profile allegation of misconduct where a childcare worker was charged with more than 70 child sex offences, including rape. This was after working 8 years at several nurseries, many of which did not have CCTV. And during the announcement, the Education Minister in Australia stressed the importance of CCTV as a safeguarding measure, referring to daytime security cameras as, and I quote, an essential component in what we need to do if we want to keep our children safe. He went on to say that police suggest CCTV cameras can be an important aspect in deterring bad behaviour, as well as a tool to help police with their investigations. And some nursery chains in our country do use CCTV, but there's no consistent national standard. And that in itself raises questions about whether current safeguarding arrangements are sufficient. There are a number of issues that we need to consider if we do consider implementing this. One is the security of CCTV systems themselves, whether footage is monitored, stored locally, how secure is that footage, and whether there are controls in place around any remote access. We need to think about, can we view that footage in the case of an incident, in what circumstances, and how is that access recorded? This could include considering role-based audible access and whether there's a case for authorised access for Ofsted inspectors as part of a routine inspection. Another area is data retention. How long should footage be kept for? When should it be deleted? How should it be prevented automatically if a safeguarding concern is raised? Clear guidance would need to ensure compliance with data protection law and prevent inappropriate access. We need to look carefully at the wider digital safeguards in early year settings around the use of digital settings and the potential benefits of introducing technical controls, such as restricting devices in early year settings to approved apps and systems, or even limiting camera or gallery functions where they're not required. Routine audits, spot checks and clear escalation processes would need to be forming part of that picture, alongside appropriate staff training on digital governance and responsible use. We should also be, I feel, open to emerging technologies which could help strengthen safeguarding processes further. This might include harnessing specialist tools designed to detect illegal content quickly and automatically, for example, Project Arachnid, I may have pronounced this wrong, developed by the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, which is used to help identify known sexual abuse material online. I don't claim to have all the answers to all the questions, but I think if we work collectively with the government, this is something we could implement to safeguard the future of children in nurseries. Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for securing this really important debate, and you're making such a compelling case for CCTV in this area. It's very difficult for all of us to listen to the harrowing stories, and I think everybody listening will be horrified about what's gone on. In terms of how you think, how my honourable friend believes the CCTV could make an impact, is there more that needs to be done to make sure that the role of Ofsted alongside the local authorities for safeguarding has to be made more effective, so that the types of incidents that you've described, that have been described in the UK, can be addressed more faster?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I'm actually coming on to the questions to the Minister, and I know the Minister is highly focused on the early years sector and has done an enormous amount for them. And one of the questions I want to ask her is around Ofsted, so I'll get to that in a minute. Could I ask the Minister, the Secretary of State talked about appointing an expert panel on CCTV. Could I ask for an update on the panel? And is there an opportunity for me to sit on the panel as representatives of the parents in my constituency? Could I ask the Minister for her response to the Lullaby Trust's campaign for GG, wherein one of their 3 objectives is mandatory CCTV in nurseries, where they state, and I quote, CCTV should not only be checked once there's a serious incident. CCTV can give staff the confidence to speak up when they see something that's concerning. It could help Ofsted to monitor regular practices in nursery even before there's a concern. In addition, the Lullaby Trust is calling for Ofsted and the Department for Education to explore reviewing CCTV footage as part of Ofsted inspections. This could act as an active safeguard, revealing concerns that may not be visible during a short inspection. Could I ask the Minister, there is an issue of cost, which all of us are aware of. Will she commission a study looking into the costs for nurseries to install CCTV? Before I finish, I want to make it very clear that I have talked a lot about keeping our children safe in nurseries, but I also want to say that I am a huge champion of the early years sector, and there are thousands and thousands of workers out there who work really hard to love, protect and look after our children. The nursery in my constituency, Pinocchio, where I sent my children, looked after my children better than I did, and my children still call their nursery manager, Yana, their second mother. So in no way is this debate a slight on the people who work really hard to look after our children, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. My focus today has been on the safeguarding crisis in some of our nurseries. There were almost 20,000 reports of serious childcare incidents in English nurseries in 5 years to March 2024. That's 40% up on the previous 5 years. Meanwhile, the number of legal claims involving injuries to children in nurseries has increased tenfold over the past decade. And I spoke to the late Genevieve's father, John, last night, and he said to me categorically that without CCTV, the investigation into his little daughter's death would not have opened, it would not have taken place, the case would have not gone to trial, and the deputy manager of the nursery would not have been convicted for manslaughter. I'm not naive to these challenges. I don't think CCTV is a silver bullet, but I do, however, think it's one step closer to safeguarding our children in the future. And I think if there's any government that would put forward this policy to look after the most vulnerable, it should be a government with Labour values. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the use of CCTV for safeguarding purposes in nurseries and early year providers. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Stringer. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today, and I thank all honourable members for attending and contributing to this really important debate today, and I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Hampstead and Highgate, for securing this vital debate and for her excellent speech this afternoon. My honourable friend has fought hard for her constituents following the horrendous case in her constituency, and I thank her for it. And I'd like to say that she is a true champion for children, for her constituents, and for the early years sector, who she rightly says do spend every day thinking about how to keep children safe. I'm grateful to her for sharing the views of providers in her constituency who she's taken the time to discuss the issue of CCTV with. and also to her for sharing the harrowing stories that she has today, which underline the urgency and significance of the action that we must take in this area. And she's made a very powerful case for the use of CCTV. My friend, the member for Dulwich and West Norwood, I'd just like to say I look forward to reading and hearing about the outcomes of the important inquiry that your committee is doing. To my friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West, the question he asks is something which will be considered by the panel that we are currently getting underway, that I will come on to talk more about. To my friend, the member for the cities of London and Westminster, on the role of Ofsted, again, this is something which is at the front of our mind. We have increased the frequency of Ofsted inspections in early years settings, and we will continue to consider the point she raises in our review. My friend, the member for Hampstead and Highgate, asks me a number of questions, which I do address in the speech I have prepared, so I shall come on to those. Mr. Stringer, I want to say that nothing is more important for me and for this government than the safety of our children. And the DfE is constantly working to ensure that children in early years settings benefit from the highest possible safeguarding standards. In September, we strengthened the rules to cover safer recruitment, what to do in the event of child absences, whistleblowing procedures, safer eating and paediatric first aid training. We also introduced new mandatory safeguarding training requirements so that all early years educators must complete training that meets our statutory criteria. And on CCTV, we are acting with the urgency that everyone here today rightly expects. In December, the Secretary of State for Education announced she would appoint an expert advisory panel to review how digital devices and CCTV are used in early years settings from a safeguarding perspective, and I can now go into further details as to the expertise that the panel will hold, how it will operate, and the panel's objectives. The panel will be meeting monthly, with the first meeting planned for later this month, and the panel will consider key points, including but not limited to whether CCTV should be mandated in early years settings, CCTV's role as part of a setting's wider safeguarding measures, how CCTV and digital devices should be managed to ensure children's privacy is protected alongside their safety, and what systems, training and safeguards are necessary to address concerns such as cybersecurity and the possible misuse of images. And we must remember that, sadly, image-generating technology can be used for harm as well as good, and we have seen in some of these awful cases that the presence of CCTV has not prevented harm. Digital devices within settings have been used to generate unlawful images and perpetrate abuse, and we have seen that nurseries and early year settings do face risks from hackers, such as in the case faced by a nursery chain last year. For these reasons, we are working across government to ensure that all possible angles are considered and that any recommended changes, including relating to any mandatory CCTV requirements, have a unified cross-government response, and so that any changes are brought in with the utmost care. The panel will consist of representatives from both the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology and the Home Office, along with relevant bodies such as the Information Commissioner's Office and the Office of the Children's Commissioner. In addition, the National Police Chiefs Council will be invited so that CCTV's use as evidence, best practice and potential misuse are covered. It's also key that the voices of all early years providers are heard in our review, along with academic experts in both early years safeguarding and surveillance technology. But Mr. Stringer, most importantly of all, I want the voices of parents and the members advocating here today to be at the heart of this review. And I will be in touch with anybody here today who would like to know more about how they can get involved as soon as possible.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I want to publicly thank her for attending a roundtable with the parents of Twickenham Green nursery victims last year, and their perpetrator sadly is about to be deported tomorrow, and actually many of those parents are feeling justice hasn't been served. But the best justice would be to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I welcome this panel, and can she assure me and my honourable friend, the member for Cheadle, who represents baby Gigi Meehan's parents, that we can feed in on behalf of those parents to make sure their concerns and views are heard, and that we learn the lessons from Australia on the CCTV pilot rollout there.
I thank the honourable member for her intervention and for her campaigning for her constituents and for that powerful roundtable which she did invite me to. And I can give her the reassurance that I just have said just now that I would like any parent or member here present today who would like to contribute to the work of that panel will have the opportunity to do so, and I'll be in touch to explain how that will happen. Before I move to conclusion, Mr Stringer, I'd like to say a word about safer sleep. In addition to calls for mandatory CCTV, the campaign for Gigi has called for clear statutory safe sleep guidance for early years settings. And I just want to say that my policy officials have worked with safe sleep experts, including the Lullaby Trust, on proposed new wording for the EYFS, which will add more detail without providers needing to refer to other guidance. We plan to make these changes as soon as possible. In closing this debate, Mr Stringer, I would like to once again thank all of the honourable members here today for their passion, their dedication for this most...
I know we're talking about CCTV, but one of the other important things that the Australian government has just introduced is a register for early years providers. So these perpetrators can therefore be stopped from going on to hurt other young victims, as was the case with the Twickenham Green nursery case and Roxana Lecker. Will she and her government also look at possibly having an early years practitioners register here in the UK?
I thank her for that important intervention, and we do have a few more moments if anybody else would like to intervene on these important topics. I would say we are absolutely considering all of the evidence, and nothing is off the table for me as I think about how we keep our children safe.
I thank the Minister for giving way. One of the issues that I would really like to be explored is the role of local authorities in terms of safeguarding. An issue that has come up with some work that I have been doing on this is where there is perceived to be a gap or lack of communication between the different roles of Ofsted and local authorities. I welcome the fact that the Minister has been clear that Ofsted inspections are increasing and are part of the review. I think it's important that local authorities are clear about their roles with early years settings.
I think she makes a very important point, and absolutely this is something which the government is focused on. In addition to the frequency, we've also increased funding for Ofsted. There are also local reviews ongoing to some of the horrendous cases that we have seen, from which we will also learn lessons. So, Mr Springer, I hope that the ongoing and planned work that I have highlighted today provides you with some reassurance that across government we are working urgently to implement the most effective and evidence-based changes to early years safeguarding and ensure the most important thing of all, that our children are safe. And I thank you all for your contributions today.
The question is that this House has considered that this House has considered the use of CCTV for safeguarding purposes in nurseries and early years providers. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. You're on the list. Yeah.
I don't think you're